They threw him out into a blizzard, but his dog led him to a frozen cabin hiding a secret his own father died protecting. Snow tore across a remote Montana valley as Caleb Walker, a broken Navy SEAL, stood abandoned with nothing but his K9. With nowhere left to go, a forgotten map and a dog's instinct pulled him into the mountains toward a frozen cabin buried in ice, and a truth powerful enough to change everything he thought he'd lost. Comment 1 if you'd follow that path. Or 0 if you'd turn back and tell me where you're watching from. The wind came hard across the Montana Valley, carrying needles of ice that cut through fabric and skin like shards of glass. Snow swept sideways in thick white sheets, swallowing the long dirt driveway and blurring the edges of the world into something cold and endless. Caleb Walker stood in the center of it, unmoving. His breath rose in uneven clouds, each exhale shaking just a little more than the last. At his feet lay everything he owned now. Black trash bags split open, clothes spilling out into the snow, tools scattered, a dented metal box cracked open like it had never meant anything at all. A framed photograph landed last. It hit the frozen ground with a dull snap, the glass splintering across the surface. Caleb didn't reach for it. He didn't move at all. Behind him, the heavy wooden door of the Hale ranch house slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the storm. Ghost stepped closer. The Belgian Malinois pressed against Caleb's leg, body tight, ears pinned forward, reading every shift in the air. His breath came slow and steady, a trained calm that stood in sharp contrast to the chaos around them. Snow clung to his coat, but he didn't shake it off. He didn't look away from the house. He was watching, waiting, protecting. Caleb finally blinked, his eyes drifting down to the shattered frame at his feet. Beneath the broken glass, a faded photo stared back at him. Emily, smiling, sunlight in her hair, one hand wrapped around his arm, the other resting gently against Ghost's head. A lifetime ago, before the war followed him home, before the nights got loud, before silence became something he feared more than gunfire. The door opened again. Victor Hale stepped out onto the porch, his tall frame wrapped in a heavy coat lined with fur. The porch light behind him cast a harsh glow, turning his face into something cold and carved, all sharp edges and no warmth. "You should have left weeks ago," Victor called out, his voice cutting clean through the storm. Caleb didn't answer. Victor took a few slow steps forward, boots crunching against the frozen wood. "My daughter is gone," he said, each word measured, controlled. "And I'm not letting you drag what's left of this family down with you." Ghost's low growl rumbled deep in his chest. Caleb reached down, resting a hand against the dog's neck. "Easy," he murmured, though his voice barely carried. Victor's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Caleb. "That thing doesn't scare me," he said flatly. "Neither do you." Caleb swallowed, his throat tight, dry. "I'm not trying to scare you." "No," Victor said, stepping down off the porch now, snow crunching beneath his boots. "You're trying to stay, and that's the problem." The wind howled louder, pushing between them like something alive. Victor gestured toward the scattered belongings. "You've got your things. That's more than you came here with." Caleb's jaw tightened, his fingers curled slightly against Ghost's fur, grounding himself, holding on to something solid. "I buried my wife here," Caleb said quietly. "That's what I came here with. I was." For a moment, the only sound was the storm. Then Victor's expression hardened even further. "You buried her," he said, "and then you stayed. Long after you should have moved on. Long after it was clear you weren't getting better." The words hit harder than the wind. Caleb felt them settle somewhere deep in his chest, heavy and familiar. Not getting better. Ghost shifted slightly, pressing closer, sensing the change. Victor continued, his voice sharp now. "You think I don't see it? The way you stare off like you're somewhere else. The way you wake up shouting in the middle of the night." He shook his head. "That's not grief anymore, Caleb. That's something else." Caleb closed his eyes for just a second. In the darkness behind them, flashes came quick and bright sand, heat, the crack of distant gunfire, the echo of voices he couldn't quite place. His pulse spiked, breath catching halfway in his lungs. Ghost nudged his hand. Once, twice. Caleb inhaled sharply, dragging himself back into the cold, into the storm, into the present. "I'm working on it," he said, though it sounded hollow even to him. Victor let out a humorless breath. "Not here, you're not." He turned slightly, glancing back toward the house, the place that had once been full of warmth, of laughter, of Emily moving through the rooms like she belonged there. "You don't belong here anymore," Victor said. The words settled with a finality that Caleb couldn't argue with. Ghost's growl faded into silence, but his body remained tense, ready. Caleb looked down again at the broken photograph. Snow had already begun to gather across Emily's face, softening her features, erasing her little by little. He bent slowly, picking it up with stiff fingers. The glass cracked further in his hand, but he didn't seem to notice. He brushed it off gently, like it might still matter, like she might still see. Behind him, Victor spoke one last time. "If you stay on this property after tonight," he said, "I'll have the sheriff out here before morning." Caleb didn't turn around. He didn't answer. He just tucked the photograph carefully into his jacket, over his heart, and reached for one of the torn bags at his feet. Ghost moved immediately, grabbing another strap in his teeth, lifting it with practiced ease. Together, they started toward the truck parked near the edge of the driveway. The engine was already running rough, a weak, uneven idle that sounded like it might give out at any moment. Snow had piled against the tires, and the windshield was coated in ice. Caleb opened the passenger door first. "Up," he said, quietly. Ghost jumped in without hesitation, turning once before settling into place, eyes still fixed on the house. Caleb loaded what he could into the back seat, hands numb, movements slower now. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he finally slid into the driver's seat, he didn't close the door right away. He just sat there, breathing, listening. The storm pressed in around him, loud and endless, but inside the truck, there was a strange, fragile quiet. Ghost leaned across the seat, placing one paw gently on Caleb's leg. Caleb looked down at him, eyes tired, worn. "Well," he said, under his breath, voice rough. "Guess it's just us now." Ghost didn't move, didn't look away, just stayed. Caleb nodded once, more to himself than anything else, and pulled the door shut. The sound echoed in the small space, final in its own way. He shifted the truck into gear, the engine coughing, protesting, but holding for now. As he pulled away, the ranch house disappeared behind a curtain of snow, the porch light fading, until it was just another distant glow swallowed by the storm. By the time it was gone completely, Caleb Walker was no longer a husband, no longer part of any family. Just a man with nothing left, and a dog who refused to leave him behind. The road ahead stretched into darkness, barely visible through the swirling white. And somewhere beyond it, whether he knew it or not, something was waiting, something buried, something that would change everything. Caleb didn't know why that thought stayed with him as the truck pushed forward into the storm. The tires struggled for grip, slipping against the frozen road, catching just enough to keep moving. Snow battered the windshield in thick waves, the wipers fighting a losing battle as ice built up faster than they could clear it. The headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the white, barely enough to see 10 feet ahead. Inside the cab, it was colder than it should have been. The heater blew weak air that carried more noise than warmth. Caleb rubbed his hands together once, then tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His knuckles were pale, fingers stiff from the cold and something deeper. Ghost shifted beside him. The dog had turned away from the ranch now, his body angled forward, eyes fixed on the road ahead. His ears flicked with every gust of wind, every subtle change in sound. He wasn't relaxed, but he wasn't anxious either. He was focused. Caleb noticed it. "Something got your attention?" he muttered, voice low. Ghost didn't respond, but his posture didn't change. The road curved sharply along the side of a ridge, disappearing into a line of dark pine trees bent under the weight of snow. The valley behind them was gone now, swallowed completely by the storm. There was no going back, not that Caleb planned to. Not anymore. The engine sputtered once, a rough cough that sent a brief spike of tension through his chest. "Don't you quit on me now," Caleb said under his breath, almost like he was talking to an old teammate holding on through one more push. The truck steadied again, barely. For a few miles there was nothing but the sound of wind and engine, the steady rhythm of survival. Then the road narrowed. The plowed surface faded into something rougher, less maintained, snow-packed, uneven, barely visible beneath the drifting layers. A weathered sign stood at the side, half buried, unreadable. Caleb slowed. "This isn't right," he murmured. Ghost stood up suddenly, front paws braced against the dash. A low, sharp sound escaped him, not a bark, not a growl, something in between, alert, intent. Caleb glanced over. "You see something?" Ghost's gaze shifted not at the road directly ahead, but slightly off to the right, toward a narrow break between the trees. Caleb followed it. At first, he saw nothing but shadow and snow. Then just for a second a faint outline. A path. Not a road, not something marked or maintained. Just a narrow cut through the forest, barely visible, almost swallowed by the storm. He slowed the truck even more, squinting through the glass. "You kidding me?" he muttered. The main road continued ahead, disappearing into darkness. But that path felt different. Ghost let out a short, firm bark. Caleb looked at him. The dog didn't move his eyes, didn't second guess, just held that line of sight like it mattered. Like it was the only thing that mattered. Caleb exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the windshield again. "All right," he said quietly. "All right." He eased the wheel to the right. The truck turned off the main road and onto the narrow path, tires crunching through deeper snow, branches brushing against the sides with a scraping sound. Almost immediately, the world changed. The wind softened, blocked by the thick trees. The noise dropped to a dull, distant howl. Shadows closed in tighter, the headlights reflecting off trunks and branches, creating flickers of movement that played tricks on the eyes. Caleb felt it the shift, like stepping into a different space. A different kind of quiet. Ghost lowered himself back onto the seat, but his body remained tense, alert. His tail gave one slow sweep against the upholstery. Caleb drove for another minute, maybe two. Then the engine coughed again, harder this time. The dashboard lights flickered. "Come on," Caleb said, pressing lightly on the gas. The truck jerked forward, then stuttered. Another cough, a metallic rattle, and then silence. The engine died. The truck rolled a few more feet before coming to a slow, uneven stop, the tires sinking slightly into the snow beneath them. For a moment, Caleb just sat there, listening. The heater went quiet. The lights dimmed, then held weakly. The storm pressed against the windows, softer now but still there, still waiting. Caleb rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel. "Yeah," he whispered. "Figured." Ghost leaned into him again, pressing his shoulder gently against Caleb's arm. Grounding. Always grounding. Caleb lifted his head and stared through the windshield. The path ahead disappeared into darkness, swallowed by trees and snow. No lights, no signs, nothing. He let out a slow breath, then reached into his jacket pocket. The paper was still there, folded, worn, carefully protected. He pulled it out, hands slower now, more deliberate. Emily's handwriting greeted him the moment he unfolded it. Soft, familiar, steady. For a second, the storm faded. The cold faded. Everything faded. He could almost hear her voice. "Caleb," he read quietly, "if things ever get too heavy, there's a place I used to go. My grandfather's cabin. It's tucked deep in the mountains, not on any map." He swallowed. Ghost shifted closer, his head resting lightly against Caleb's side. Caleb continued reading. "It's quiet there. Safe. Like the world can't reach you. I always thought, maybe one day, we'd go there together." The words blurred slightly. Caleb blinked, steadying himself. There was more a rough sketch beneath the writing. A hand-drawn map. Simple lines. A ridge. A tree line. A mark where the path split. And a small circle. The cabin. Caleb looked up slowly, his eyes drifting toward the dark path ahead. Then back to the map. Then to Ghost. The dog was watching him now. Not the road. Not the trees. Him. Waiting. Caleb let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Of course," he said quietly. "Of course it's this." The storm outside picked up again, wind pushing through the trees with a low, hollow sound. The truck wasn't going anywhere. That much was clear. Caleb folded the map carefully and slipped it back into his jacket. Then he reached behind the seat, pulling out a worn backpack. Inside basic gear. Nothing special. Nothing prepared for this. But enough. It had to be enough. He opened the door. The cold hit instantly, sharp and biting, stealing his breath for a second before he forced his body to adjust. Snow crunched beneath his boots. Ghost jumped down beside him, landing solid, steady. Caleb shut the door behind them, the sound echoing softly in the trees. For a moment they stood there together, man and dog, alone in the mountains. Caleb looked down at Ghost. "Well," he said, his voice calmer now, steadier. "You wanted this direction." Ghost's ears twitched. Caleb nodded once. "Then you lead." Ghost didn't hesitate. He turned immediately, stepping forward into the darkness, nose low, body moving with quiet purpose. Caleb followed. One step, then another. Behind them, the truck sat silent, half buried already, fading into the storm like it had never mattered. Ahead, only trees, snow, and a path that wasn't supposed to exist. Somewhere out there, something buried, something waiting, and now, they were coming for it. The forest closed in almost immediately. Branches heavy with snow bent low, forcing Caleb to duck as he followed Ghost into the narrow path. The deeper they moved, the quieter the world became. The wind lost its sharp edge, reduced to a distant murmur beyond the thick wall of pine and shadow. All that remained was the sound of boots in snow. Crunch. Step. Crunch. Ghost moved ahead with steady precision, his body cutting a path through drifts that reached nearly to Caleb's knees. He didn't hesitate, didn't circle, or second guess. His nose stayed low, his ears shifting constantly, tracking something Caleb couldn't see or hear. Caleb focused on that, on Ghost. Because the moment he didn't, the silence started to change. It wasn't just quiet. It was wrong. Too still. Too complete. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears until it started to feel loud. Caleb's breath quickened. His vision narrowed. Snow turned to dust. White to tan. Cold to heat. The trees disappeared. And suddenly, he wasn't in Montana anymore. He was back in Helmand Province. The air burned instead of froze. The ground shifted beneath his boots, dry and unstable. A distant pop echoed through the valley, sharp, unmistakable. Gunfire. Caleb froze. His body locked before his mind caught up. His heart slammed against his ribs, breath caught halfway in his chest. His eyes scanned the tree line that wasn't there, searching for movement that didn't exist. Contact left, a voice shouted somewhere behind him. Another voice. Closer. Walker, move. Caleb turned sharply, pulse spiking. There was no one there. Only snow. Only trees. Only Ghost. The dog had stopped. He stood just ahead, looking back, his posture firm, alert, but not alarmed. Grounded. Real. Ghost took 2 steps back toward him. Then he nudged Caleb's thigh. Once. Twice. Harder this time. Caleb blinked. The desert shattered. Cold rushed back in. The weight of snow under his boots returned, grounding him, pulling him out of the memory before it swallowed him whole. I'm here, Caleb whispered, voice rough, unsteady. I'm here. Ghost pressed closer, his shoulder against Caleb's leg, holding contact, holding him in place. Caleb bent slightly, resting his hand on the dog's neck, fingers gripping into the thick fur like it was something solid in a world that kept slipping sideways. Good boy, he murmured. Yeah, good boy. For a few seconds, they didn't move. The forest breathed around them. Then Ghost turned again and continued forward. Caleb followed. Step by step, he matched the dog's pace, focusing on the rhythm of movement, the crunch of snow, the steady rise and fall of his breath, the quiet certainty in Ghost's stride. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time stretched differently out here. The path grew narrower, the trees thicker, the light dimmer as the storm above blocked what little sun remained. Caleb checked his watch out of habit. Dead. Of course. He let out a short breath that almost became a laugh. Figures, he muttered. Ghost slowed suddenly, his ears lifted high, body going rigid. Caleb stopped instantly behind him. What is it? He whispered. Ghost didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stood there, listening. Caleb strained his own ears, trying to pick up whatever Ghost had caught. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound, distant, almost buried under the snow. A creak. Not wood, not wind. Something deeper. Older. Caleb's eyes narrowed. You hear that? He asked quietly. Ghost shifted his weight, then angled slightly to the left. Without hesitation, he stepped off the faint path they'd been following and moved between 2 tightly spaced trees. Caleb hesitated for half a second, then followed. Branches scraped against his coat as he pushed through, snow falling in loose clumps around him. The ground sloped slightly upward now, uneven beneath the drifts. His legs burned with the effort, muscles tightening with each step. Ghost moved faster, more focused. Whatever he was tracking, it was close. Caleb's pulse picked up again, but this time, it wasn't panic. It was something else. Anticipation. They crested a small rise. And then, Ghost stopped completely. Caleb stepped up beside him. For a moment, he didn't understand what he was looking at. It blended too well. Too naturally. Snow, rock, tree, shadow. Then the shape revealed itself. Subtle, Rounded. Wrong. Caleb stepped closer, squinting through the dim light. The snow shifted slightly under his boot, sliding down a curved surface. Wood. He froze. No way, he whispered. Ghost moved forward, brushing snow aside with his nose, then his paws, uncovering more of the structure beneath. A wall, log built, half buried, frozen into the mountainside like it had always been there. Caleb reached out slowly, his gloved hand brushing across the surface. Ice cracked lightly beneath his touch, revealing dark, aged wood beneath. His heart pounded harder now. Not from fear, from disbelief. This is it, he said, almost to himself. It's actually here. Ghost circled slightly, then stopped at one section of the wall. His behavior changed instantly. He began to paw at the snow fast, urgent, not random, focused. He let out a sharp bark, then another. Caleb turned toward him. What is it? Ghost didn't stop. He dug harder, pushing snow aside in quick bursts, exposing more of the structure beneath. Caleb stepped closer, dropping to one knee, despite the cold biting through his pants. Easy, he said, brushing snow aside with his own hands now. The shape became clearer. A door, low, rounded at the top, sealed shut with ice. Ghost paused only long enough to look at Caleb, eyes sharp, intense. Then he barked again. Louder. More urgent. Caleb felt it then, not just the discovery, not just the relief of finding something real, but something underneath it. A pull. A sense that this place, this cabin, wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting. He stood slowly, breath fogging in the cold air. All right, he said, voice steadying. Let's see what you brought me to. Ghost stepped back, watching. Waiting. Caleb placed both hands against the frozen door. The wood was solid, cold, unyielding, but behind it, something felt different. Caleb tightened his grip and pushed. At first, nothing happened. The door didn't move. It didn't even creak. It felt like it had been part of the mountain longer than the trees around it, frozen solid into place by years of winter pressing down against it. Caleb leaned harder. His boots slipped slightly in the snow, forcing him to adjust his stance. He braced one shoulder against the wood, pressing with steady, controlled force the same way he had forced open doors in places far more dangerous than this. The ice cracked, a faint brittle sound. Ghost's ears snapped forward. Caleb felt it through his shoulder, the slight shift, the smallest give. Come on, he muttered. He pushed again, this time harder. The ice along the edges fractured with a sharp, splitting sound, flakes breaking loose and falling into the snow at his feet. The door groaned faintly, like something waking up after a long sleep. Then it stopped again. Caleb stepped back, breathing heavier now. The cold had seeped deeper into his bones, draining his strength faster than he expected. His arms trembled slightly from the effort. Ghost stepped forward, pressing his nose against the seam of the door, sniffing once, then again. Then he barked. Short, sharp, urgent. Caleb glanced at him. You're sure about this? He asked quietly. Ghost didn't hesitate. He barked again. Caleb let out a breath through his nose, nodding once. All right. He stepped forward again, setting his shoulder against the door, planting his boots firmly in the snow. This time, he didn't rush it. He didn't force it all at once. He leaned in slowly, controlled, constant pressure, the kind that broke things without warning. The wood creaked. The ice cracked deeper, spreading along the edges like fractures across glass. Then, with a sudden, sharp release, the door shifted inward, just enough. Cold air rushed past Caleb, slipping through the narrow opening. But it wasn't just cold. There was something else, something warmer beneath it. Caleb froze. Ghost went completely still. They both felt it, that subtle difference in the air. Caleb pulled back slightly, his breath catching. That's not right, he whispered. A cabin sealed in ice, buried in the mountain. Should have been frozen inside. Dead. Empty. But this felt different. Ghost stepped forward without waiting. He pushed his nose against the gap and forced his way through, slipping inside with quiet confidence. Ghost, Caleb started. But the dog was already gone. Caleb hesitated for only a second, then followed. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world shifted. The wind vanished. The storm disappeared behind him as the door fell partially closed with a dull, heavy sound. Silence. Complete. Absolute. Caleb stood just inside, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior. The air was still, Warmer than outside, but not by much. Just enough to feel wrong. His breath came slower now, less visible in the faint light filtering through frost-covered windows. "Ghost?" he called softly. A soft movement answered him. The dog stepped into view from deeper inside the cabin, his posture alert but not aggressive. His tail stayed low, steady, his ears shifting as he scanned the space. Caleb moved forward cautiously. Each step echoed faintly on the wooden floor beneath him. The cabin was small, rounder than expected, the walls curved slightly, built from thick logs darkened by time. Snow pressed against the windows from the outside, muting the light into a soft gray glow that barely touched the far corners of the room. Everything inside was intact. A table, chairs, shelves lined with old tools, a cast-iron stove in the corner, a coat hanging on a peg by the door. Caleb stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing looked looted. It looked like someone had walked out and never come back. Ghost moved slowly through the room, nose working the air. He paused near the stove, sniffing once before shifting away. Then he circled toward the center of the cabin. Caleb followed, his boots creaking softly against the wood. "Emily," he murmured under his breath, glancing around. What was this place? He stepped closer to the table. A thin layer of dust covered the surface, undisturbed. Except, there, a faint line, as if something had been moved recently. Caleb frowned, brushing his hand lightly across it. The dust shifted under his touch. "This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. Ghost let out a low sound behind him. Not a growl, not fear. Something closer to urgency. Caleb turned. The dog stood in the middle of the room now, directly over a section of the floor. Still, focused. His entire body locked onto that one spot. "What is it?" Caleb asked. Ghost lowered his head slightly, then pawed at the floor. Once, twice, harder. The sound echoed sharper than anything else in the cabin. Wood against claw. Caleb stepped closer. "Hey, easy," he said, though his voice carried more curiosity than warning. Ghost didn't stop. He pawed again, faster now, then barked, loud. The sound bounced off the walls, filling the small space with sudden intensity. Caleb crouched down beside him, running his hand across the floorboards. They felt solid, old, but different. He pressed harder. There was a slight give, almost unnoticeable. Caleb's pulse quickened. "Hold on," he muttered. He brushed away dust, revealing the grain of the wood beneath. At first, it looked normal. Then he saw it. A faint outline. Rectangular, perfectly shaped. A seam, hidden in plain sight. Caleb sat back slightly, staring at it. "A hatch," he whispered. Ghost stopped pawing, but he didn't move. He just stared at Caleb, waiting. Caleb reached forward slowly, fingers tracing along the edge of the hidden panel. The seam was tight, nearly invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. "Someone didn't want this found," he said. Ghost let out a soft, low sound. Agreement. Caleb scanned the floor again, searching. There's got to be a latch. His fingers moved carefully across the surface. Then, he felt it. A small indentation, barely enough to catch. He pressed. Nothing. He shifted his grip, hooking his fingers deeper, pulling upward. The wood resisted, then gave. With a dull, heavy sound, the panel lifted slightly. Cold air rushed up from below. Different from the storm. Colder, darker, deeper. Caleb froze. Ghost stepped back slightly, but not out of fear. Out of readiness. Caleb lifted the panel further. The hatch opened fully, revealing darkness. A narrow opening, and beneath it, a faint, steady hum. Low, mechanical, alive. Caleb stared down into it, his chest tightening. "That's not possible," he whispered. A place like this. Hidden, frozen, forgotten. Shouldn't have power. Shouldn't have anything running. Ghost moved closer again, peering into the opening, his ears angled forward. Then he looked back at Caleb. Not afraid, not uncertain. Ready. Caleb exhaled slowly. Every instinct he had told him to step back, to close it, to walk away. But another voice, quieter, stronger, told him something else. This was why they were here. He looked at Ghost. "You trust this?" he asked. Ghost didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and began to descend into the darkness. Caleb watched him go for a second, then followed, because turning back was no longer an option. Caleb lowered himself through the hatch, one hand gripping the edge, the other bracing against the rough wooden frame. His boots found the first step, a narrow ladder carved into the wall, cold and solid beneath his weight. Ghost was already below him. A faint sound of claws against wood echoed upward, steady and controlled, as the dog descended with confidence into the darkness. Caleb followed. One step, then another. The air changed the deeper he went. Above, the cabin had been cold, but still lifeless, in a quiet, abandoned way. Down here, the air felt different. It carried a faint warmth, barely noticeable, but real. Not enough to comfort, but enough to raise questions. And that hum, it grew louder, still low, still steady, like something breathing beneath the earth. Caleb's boots touched ground. He stepped off the ladder slowly, crouching slightly as his eyes adjusted to the dimness. At first, there was nothing. Only darkness. Then, shapes, edges, lines emerging from shadow. The space opened wider than he expected. A tunnel stretched ahead, reinforced with old wooden beams and sections of steel, their surfaces worn but intact. The walls were packed earth and stone, carved deliberately, not naturally formed. This wasn't random. This was built. "Ghost," Caleb whispered. A soft sound answered him. The dog stood a few feet ahead, his body outlined in the faint glow coming from deeper within the tunnel. His posture was alert, but calm. His tail hung steady. His ears moved slightly, tracking the subtle vibrations in the space. Caleb stepped forward. The ground beneath him was firm, almost smooth in places, like it had been walked many times. Used, maintained, but not recently. Dust clung to the edges of the walls, thin but undisturbed, except for the path they now walked. The hum pulsed slightly, almost imperceptible, but constant. Caleb's heartbeat began to match it. Slow, measured, controlled. The tunnel curved gently to the left. Ghost moved ahead, pausing every few steps to glance back, making sure Caleb was still there, still following, still steady. Caleb appreciated that more than he could say, because the deeper they went, the more the place pressed in on him, not with fear, not exactly, but with weight, history, something unseen. The tunnel opened suddenly. Caleb stopped. His breath caught. The space beyond was vast compared to the narrow passage they had just come through. A chamber, carved deep into the mountain, circular, high enough that the ceiling disappeared into shadow above, and inside, order. Rows of metal crates lined the walls, stacked carefully, each one marked with faded stenciling. Shelves carved into the rock held old equipment, radios, tools, sealed containers. A long table stood near the center, covered with maps, papers, and objects frozen in time. A single overhead light flickered faintly. Still working. Still powered. After all these years, Caleb stepped forward slowly. "What is this place?" he whispered. Ghost moved through the room with quiet precision, nose low, scanning every corner. He didn't rush. He didn't react with fear. He treated it like unknown territory. Controlled. Disciplined. Just like he had been trained. Caleb approached the nearest crate. He brushed his glove across the surface, clearing away a layer of dust. Letters appeared beneath. Faded, but readable. U.S. Navy. Supply Division. Caleb's chest tightened. "No," he murmured. He moved to another crate. Different markings. Coordinates. Dates. Old. Very old. He turned slowly, taking in the entire chamber again. This wasn't just a cabin. It wasn't just a shelter. This was something else. Something hidden on purpose. Something important. Ghost stopped near the far wall. He didn't bark. Didn't paw. He just stood there, staring. Caleb followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Just another section of wall. Another shelf. Then, a shape. Rectangular. Framed. Caleb stepped closer. His pulse quickened. It was a photograph. Protected behind glass. Unlike everything else, it wasn't covered in dust, as if it had been handled more recently, or cared for. Caleb reached out slowly. His fingers brushed the edge of the frame. He lifted it gently, and froze. The world seemed to narrow around him. The hum faded. The cold faded. Everything faded, except the image in his hands. A man stood in the center of the photo. Younger, stronger. Dressed in military gear, Caleb recognized immediately. Not standard. Not public. Something deeper. Something classified. The man's expression was steady, confident, and familiar. Too familiar. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. "Dad?" he whispered. His fingers tightened around the frame. The man beside him in the photo, another soldier, older, with a serious face and sharp eyes. But Caleb didn't see him. He only saw his father, a man who had never spoken about service, never worn a uniform, never mentioned anything beyond a quiet life and simple work. And yet, here he was, standing inside this very place. Decades ago. Caleb's mind raced. "That's not possible," he said, shaking his head slightly. "He wasn't. He never." Ghost stepped closer, pressed his head gently against Caleb's side, grounding him again, holding him steady. Caleb swallowed hard, forcing his breathing to slow. He looked around the chamber again. The crates, the equipment, the maps, then back at the photo. "No," he said quietly. "This wasn't random. This place, this cabin, this bunker, it was connected to his father, to something his father had never told him, something buried, something hidden on purpose." Ghost moved again, this time toward the center table. He sniffed once, then looked back at Caleb, waiting. Caleb hesitated, then followed. The table was covered in documents, some rolled, some laid flat, all preserved under a thin layer of time. He brushed one aside, another beneath it. Then, a small device, old, compact, a recorder. Caleb stared at it. His chest tightened again. "This place," he whispered. "It wasn't just built. It was left behind, with intention." Ghost sat down beside the table. Still, focused, Caleb reached for the recorder slowly. His hand hovered over it, then stopped, because, in that moment, he understood something. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a message. One meant for someone, one meant for him. The hum around them continued, steady, unchanging. Like the mountain itself was waiting. Caleb exhaled slowly, then picked up the recorder, and everything was about to change. Caleb held the recorder in his hand, turning it slowly as if it might disappear if he moved too fast. The casing was worn but intact, metal edges dulled by time. A thin layer of dust clung to its surface except for one spot. The play button. Clean, recently touched. Caleb's thumb hovered over it. His heart began to pound again, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, anticipation, and something close to dread. Ghost shifted beside him. Not restless, not nervous, just watching, waiting. Caleb swallowed hard. "If this is some kind of setup," he muttered under his breath, though he already knew it wasn't. Nothing about this place felt random. Nothing about it felt accidental. He pressed the button. At first, nothing. Then, a faint click. Static crackled through the chamber, bouncing softly off the walls, filling the silence with a low hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Caleb held still. Ghost's ears flicked. Then, a voice. Rough, calm, familiar in a way Caleb couldn't explain at first. "If you're hearing this, then you found it." Caleb's breath caught. His fingers tightened around the recorder. "And if you found it, then things didn't go the way I hoped they would." The voice was older, tired, but steady. Caleb's eyes drifted back to the photograph on the wall. His chest tightened. "Dad," he whispered. The recording continued. "My name is Thomas Walker. If you're listening, then you're probably my son, Caleb." The world seemed to tilt. The chamber felt smaller, closer. Ghost pressed against Caleb's leg, sensing the shift. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. He just listened. "I never told you about this place," the voice continued. "Never told you about what I did before I came home. That was by design. Some things weren't meant to follow us back." A pause. Static filled the space again. Then, "But I knew one day, you might need it." Caleb's jaw tightened. His throat burned. "What is this?" he muttered, barely audible. The voice went on. "This cabin, this bunker, it wasn't just built for war. It was built for what comes after. For the ones who come home carrying more than they should. For the ones who don't have anywhere left to go." Caleb closed his eyes for a second. Images flashed again. Desert heat, smoke, the sound of distant explosions, but this time, they didn't pull him under. They stayed at the surface, because the voice held him in place. "I saw it happen too many times," his father said. "Men who gave everything, then came back to nothing. No support, no understanding, just silence." Caleb's grip tightened. Ghost leaned closer. You're not broken, the voice said. Steady, certain. You're carrying weight that was never meant to be carried alone. Caleb's breathing faltered. His chest rose sharply. For a moment the words hit harder than anything Victor Hale had said. Because they weren't accusations. They were understanding. I built this place with others, his father continued. Quietly. Off the books. A fallback. A sanctuary. Somewhere no one could take from you. Somewhere the world couldn't reach you. Caleb opened his eyes slowly, looked around the chamber again. The crates. The equipment. The hidden structure beneath the mountain. This was all yours, he whispered. Ghost shifted slightly, his head brushing Caleb's hand. The recording crackled. Then, there's more down here, the voice said. Things you'll need. Things I hoped you'd never have to find. A pause, longer this time, as if the man on the other end had struggled to say what came next. I know what it's like, son, he said quietly. The nights, the noise that doesn't stop, the feeling that you're still there, even when you're not. Caleb's vision blurred. His knees felt weak. He lowered himself slowly onto the edge of the table, the recorder still playing in his hand. Ghost stayed close. Didn't leave him. Didn't move away. You'll want to run from it, the voice continued. Or shut it down. But that's not how it works. You don't fight it alone. You build something stronger around it. Caleb let out a shaky breath. His hand came up, pressing briefly against his eyes before dropping again. I didn't leave this for you because I thought you'd fail, his father said. I left it because I knew you'd survive. The words settled deep, heavy, real. And if you're here, the voice added, then you already have. The recording crackled again, then softened. One more thing, his father said. Caleb straightened slightly, listened harder. This place isn't just for you. Caleb frowned faintly. What do you mean? Ghost's ears lifted again. The hum in the chamber seemed to deepen slightly. There are others out there, the voice continued. Men like you. Dogs like yours. Partners who carried each other through things no one else understands. Caleb glanced at Ghost. The dog met his eyes. Still, steady. You'll know what to do, his father said, when the time comes. Another pause. Then, if I didn't get to say it before, I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than anything else. Caleb's breath caught sharply. His grip on the recorder tightened until his knuckles whitened. I always was. The recording clicked. Static returned for a second. Then, silence. Complete. The hum in the chamber filled the space again, steady and unchanging. Caleb sat there for a long moment, not moving, not speaking. Ghost rested his head against Caleb's leg, anchoring him in the quiet. Finally, Caleb let out a long, slow breath. That explains the cabin, he said softly. But not all of this. He looked around again. The crates, the equipment, the deeper shadows beyond the chamber walls. There's more down here, he murmured. Ghost stood, turned, looked toward a darker section of the chamber Caleb hadn't fully explored yet. A corridor, narrow, half hidden behind stacked supplies. The dog's posture changed again, focused, intent. Caleb noticed it immediately. You found something else, he said. Ghost didn't bark, didn't move. He just waited. Caleb pushed himself to his feet slowly, every muscle still tight with the weight of what he'd just heard. His father, this place, all of it connected, all of it real, and still not finished. Caleb stepped toward Ghost, toward the hidden corridor, toward whatever came next, because now, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was purpose. And somewhere deeper in the mountain, the truth wasn't done revealing itself. Caleb stepped into the narrow corridor, his boots echoing softly against the hardened ground. The light from the main chamber faded quickly behind him, replaced by a dim amber glow coming from deeper within. Ghost moved ahead, slower now, more cautious. His nose hovered just above the ground, his ears flicking with every subtle sound. The air changed again, warmer, heavier. Like the deeper they went, the more the mountain pressed down around them. Caleb ran a hand along the wall as he walked. The surface wasn't rough like the tunnel they had entered through. It was smoother here, reinforced with metal plates, bolted directly into the stone. This part had been engineered, deliberately, carefully. Dad, Caleb murmured under his breath. What were you really part of? The corridor curved once, then opened. Caleb stepped through the threshold and stopped. The space beyond was unlike anything he had seen before. Larger than the first chamber. More organized. More active. Rows of equipment lined the walls, larger units now. Generators, filtration systems, storage racks stacked with sealed containers. Thick cables ran along the ceiling, disappearing into the rock like veins, feeding something unseen. Lights hummed overhead, not flickering, not failing. Steady, alive. Caleb's chest tightened. "This isn't abandoned," he whispered. Ghost stepped forward into the room, his body tense but controlled. He scanned left, then right, then moved slowly along the perimeter, checking every corner. Caleb followed, his eyes moving rapidly, trying to take it all in. A table sat near the center, larger than the one in the first chamber, covered with documents, maps, and sealed folders marked with faded government stamps. He stepped closer. His hand hovered over one of the folders, then opened it. Inside, reports, typed, stamped, dates from decades ago, operations, coordinates, names blacked out. Caleb flipped through a few pages quickly, his breath growing heavier. "This wasn't just a fallback shelter," he said quietly. "This was a command post." Ghost let out a low sound. Not fear, recognition. Caleb glanced at him. "You've seen places like this before, haven't you?" Ghost's ears shifted slightly. The dog didn't answer, but he didn't need to. They both had. Caleb moved deeper into the room. Something pulled his attention toward the far wall. A series of lockers. Metal. Sealed. Each one marked with a number. And beneath it, a name. Caleb stepped closer. "Read the first. Then the second. Then the third." Each name different. Each one unfamiliar. But the pattern was clear. "These weren't random," Caleb said softly. He moved to another locker. His hand paused on the surface, then dropped. His breath caught. The name there. Walker. C. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. "No," he whispered. He reached out slowly. His fingers brushed across the metal. Cold. Solid. Real. "Why is my name here?" "Guy." Ghost stepped beside him, pressing lightly against his leg. Caleb swallowed hard. "This was built before I ever came home," he said. "Before I even enlisted." His mind raced. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "You might need it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "This wasn't a backup plan," he said. "This was preparation." Ghost suddenly stiffened. His ears snapped forward. A low growl built in his chest. Caleb reacted instantly. His body shifted. Posture changed. Breathing slowed. "What is it?" he whispered. Ghost turned his head slightly. Not toward the lockers. Not toward the equipment. Toward the far corner of the room, where the shadows were deeper, where the light didn't quite reach. Caleb followed his gaze. At first, nothing. Then, a shape. Covered. A large object beneath a heavy canvas tarp. Caleb stepped closer. Slow. Measured. His instincts were sharp now, fully awake. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was awareness. Ghost moved with him, staying close, ready. Caleb reached out, gripped the edge of the tarp, and pulled. The fabric slid away, revealing a desk. Old. Solid. Well-maintained. And on it, a single envelope. Clean. Untouched by dust. Waiting. Caleb stared at it. His name was written across the front. Clear. Deliberate. Caleb Walker. His chest tightened again. "They knew," he said quietly. "They knew I'd come here." Ghost let out a soft sound, his tension easing slightly. Caleb picked up the envelope carefully. It felt heavier than it should, as if what was inside carried more than just paper. He turned it over. The seal was intact, unbroken. Caleb hesitated. His hand hovered at the edge. Everything in him told him this. This was the moment, the one that connected everything. His father, the cabin, the bunker, his name on that locker. Nothing about this was coincidence. Nothing about it was accidental. He looked down at Ghost. "You ready for this?" he asked. Ghost held his gaze. Steady. Certain. Caleb nodded once, then broke the seal. He opened the envelope slowly, pulling out the folded paper inside, unfolding it carefully. His eyes scanned the first line, and stopped, because the handwriting wasn't his father's. It was Emily's. Caleb's breath caught sharply. "No," he whispered. His hands trembled slightly as he read. "If you're reading this, Caleb, then you made it." His vision blurred. His chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. Emily, here, connected to this place, connected to everything. Caleb shook his head slowly, trying to process it. You knew? He whispered. You knew about this? Ghost pressed closer again. Grounding, holding. Caleb kept reading, each word pulling him deeper, each sentence unraveling something he hadn't even known was hidden. The truth wasn't just buried beneath the mountain. It had been buried in his life, in his past, in everything he thought he understood. And now, it was all coming to the surface. Caleb's hands trembled as he steadied the letter. The paper felt fragile, like it had waited too long to be opened. The ink, Emily's handwriting, was unmistakable. Soft curves, careful strokes, the same way she used to leave notes on the kitchen counter, tucked beside his coffee mug. Except this. This wasn't a reminder. This was a goodbye. Ghost stayed pressed against his leg, silent and still, sensing the shift in Caleb's breathing, the way his chest tightened with each word he read. Caleb forced himself to continue. Caleb, if you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to bring you here myself. His throat closed. He swallowed hard, blinking through the blur forming in his vision. I didn't even know, he whispered. The chamber around him faded slightly, the hum dulling beneath the weight of her voice echoing in his mind. I wanted to show you this place when things were different. When you were ready. When I was sure we had time. Caleb lowered himself slowly into the chair behind the desk, his knees weak, his strength slipping in quiet waves. Ghost adjusted immediately, sitting beside him, leaning just enough to keep contact, grounding him, keeping him here. I grew up coming to this cabin, Emily's letter continued. My grandfather built it, but what he built beneath it, that was something else. He trusted very few people with it. But he trusted your father. Caleb froze. My dad, he murmured. His eyes lifted briefly, scanning the chamber again, the lockers, the equipment, the systems, still humming beneath decades of silence. They worked together, he said under his breath. Ghost's ears twitched slightly, as if acknowledging the realization. Emily's words pulled him back. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure you'd understand. And maybe I was afraid of what it would mean. Oh. Caleb exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on the paper. I would have understood, he said quietly. You just had to tell me. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Not then, not before everything changed. Not before the war followed him home. The letter continued. You always carried more than you let anyone see. I saw it long before you did. The way you held things in. The way you pushed through, instead of slowing down. Caleb's jaw tightened. Those words hit closer than anything his father had said. Because they came from her. From someone who had watched him fall apart slowly without ever saying it out loud. I knew one day you might need something stronger than me to hold you together. Caleb's breath caught. Ghost shifted closer. I didn't need anything stronger than you, Caleb whispered, his voice cracking slightly. But the silence around him didn't answer, because she wasn't there anymore. The words were all that remained. That's why I wanted you to find this place, the letter said. Not as a secret, but as a second chance. Caleb stared at the page. A second chance. He hadn't thought about that in a long time. Not since the nights got louder. Not since the memories stopped letting him sleep. Not since Victor Hale's words started sounding more like truth than insult. You were never broken, Caleb. The line hit him hard. He closed his eyes, letting it sink in, letting it settle somewhere deeper than the noise that usually filled his head. You were carrying things no one else could see. And I should have said that more. Caleb exhaled slowly. His hand rose, pressing briefly against his chest as if trying to steady something inside. Ghost rested his head gently on Caleb's knee. Steady, present, real. The letter continued. If you're here now, then it means something went wrong. And if that's true, then I need you to listen to me. Caleb opened his eyes again, focusing harder. His posture shifted slightly, more alert, more present. This wasn't just emotion anymore. There was something else beneath it. Something important. There are people who know about this place, Emily wrote. Not many, but enough. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? He murmured. His mind immediately went to Victor Hale. The ranch. The way he had forced him out so quickly. Too quickly. You might think what happened back at the ranch was just anger or grief, Emily's letter continued. But it's not that simple. Caleb leaned forward slightly. Ghost's ears lifted. There it was. The shift. The turn. the truth beneath the surface. My father, Victor, he always believed this place belonged to him, Emily wrote. But my grandfather never trusted him with it. Not fully. Not like he trusted your father. Caleb's jaw tightened. That's why, he said quietly. That's why he wanted me gone. The pieces started to fall into place. Victor hadn't just pushed him out because of grief, or anger, or resentment. He had pushed him out because Caleb stood in the way. If Victor ever thought you knew about this place, Emily's words continued, he would try to take it. Not because he understands it, but because he thinks it's valuable. Caleb's hands tightened into fists. The calm from moments ago shifted, hardened. Of course he does, Caleb said under his breath. Ghost's posture changed slightly. More alert now, more ready, as if the tension had moved from internal to external. There's more here than just shelter, Emily wrote. More than just supplies. Things your father helped protect. Things that could attract attention if the wrong people find them. Caleb exhaled slowly. His mind moved faster now. Clearer. Focused. The emotional weight was still there, but it wasn't drowning him anymore. It was anchoring him. You don't have to fight this alone, the letter continued. But you do have to choose what to do next. Caleb stared at those words. Choose. That was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not since the war. Not since the loss. Not since everything started closing in around him. He folded the letter carefully, held it for a moment longer, then slipped it into his jacket, beside the photograph he had carried from the snow. Ghost nudged his hand once. Soft, reassuring. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, he said quietly. I hear you. He stood. The chamber felt different now. Not just a place to survive. Not just a hidden refuge. But something else. A responsibility. A choice. Then, Ghost froze. His ears snapped forward. His body stiffened instantly. Caleb saw it. Felt it. The shift. What is it? He whispered. Ghost turned his head sharply, toward the tunnel they had entered from. Caleb listened. At first, nothing. Then, faint, distant. A sound. Barely there. But real. Snow shifting. Footsteps. Caleb's chest tightened. His mind snapped into place instantly. Not panic. Not confusion. Training. Someone's outside, he said quietly. Ghost let out a low growl. Caleb's posture changed. Shoulders squared. Breathing slowed. Focus sharpened. Stay with me, he whispered. Because whatever Emily had warned him about, it wasn't waiting anymore. It was here. Caleb didn't move. Every instinct he had, every year of training, every mission that had burned itself into his bones took over in an instant. His breathing slowed. His pulse steadied. The weight of emotion from moments ago locked itself away behind something colder. Focused, Ghost stood beside him, completely still, his low growl vibrating softly through the chamber. Caleb tilted his head slightly, listening. There. Again. Faint, but unmistakable. Snow compressing under weight. More than one set of footsteps. They found it, Caleb whispered. Ghost's ears remained fixed toward the tunnel, his body angled forward, ready. Caleb's eyes scanned the room quickly, calculating. Entrances. Exits. Cover. The tunnel they came through. The narrow corridor behind them. The deeper sections of the bunker. Stay close, Caleb said quietly. Ghost didn't move away. He never did. The footsteps above grew louder. Closer. Then, a heavy thud echoed faintly through the ceiling. Wood shifting. A door. The cabin. They're inside, Caleb murmured. Ghost's growl deepened slightly. Caleb stepped back from the center of the room, moving toward the wall, placing himself in shadow. Quiet now, he whispered. Ghost obeyed instantly, lowering his body, his movements silent. Above them, muffled voices broke through the storm, faint at first, then clearer. This is it. Another voice. You sure? Tracks lead right here. He came this way. Caleb's jaw tightened. They tracked us, he said, under his breath. Ghost's ears twitched. Caleb pressed his back lightly against the wall, every sense tuned upward. Boots moved across the cabin floor. Furniture shifted. Wood creaked. They're searching, Caleb whispered. Ghost shifted slightly, ready. Caleb raised a hand, signaling stillness. Not yet. The voices above moved closer to the hatch. Caleb's eyes lifted toward the ceiling instinctively. Every muscle in his body coiled. Then, a loud scrape, the rug being moved. They found it, Caleb said quietly. Ghost's body tensed further. A metallic sound followed. Then, the dull, heavy creak of the hatch being pulled open. Cold air spilled down into the tunnel. Caleb's breath slowed, even more. Controlled. Measured. A beam of light cut through the darkness above. Flashlight. It swept across the tunnel opening. Paused. Then moved deeper. Yeah, one of the men said. There's something down here. Another voice answered. Boss said there would be. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Boss? He didn't need to guess. Victor Hale. Ghost let out the faintest rumble. Caleb placed a hand lightly against his neck. Easy, he whispered. The first man started descending the ladder. Slow. Cautious. Caleb shifted position slightly, placing a solid crate between himself and the tunnel entrance. He wasn't here to attack. Not yet. Not unless he had to. The man reached the bottom. Boots hit the ground with a soft thud. His flashlight cut across the chamber, sweeping wide. Clear, he called quietly. Another man followed. Then another. 3 total. Armed. Disciplined. Not random locals. Not amateurs. Caleb recognized it instantly. They're trained, he murmured. Ghost's ears flicked. The men moved carefully through the room, scanning everything. The crates. The table. The equipment. One of them stopped near the lockers. Look at this, he said. What is it? Another asked. Names. Someone's been prepping this place. Caleb's eyes hardened. They were getting too close. Too fast. Another man moved toward the desk, toward the spot where Caleb had found the letter, toward where everything had just changed. Ghost shifted slightly. Caleb felt it. The tension. The need to act. But he held. Not yet. The man reached the desk. His flashlight passed over the surface. Paused. Then? He frowned. Something was here, he said. Caleb's jaw tightened. Recently, the room went still. The air changed. The search became sharper, more aggressive. Spread out, one of them said. He's down here. Ghost's growl deepened. Caleb leaned closer, whispering just above silence. They don't know where. That was the advantage. For now, footsteps moved closer. One of the men passed within 10 feet of Caleb's position. Flashlight sweeping. Caleb stayed perfectly still. Breath. Controlled. Body locked. Ghost didn't move. Didn't blink. The beam of light passed over the crate. Paused. Then moved on. The man kept walking. Caleb exhaled slowly. Silent. Measured. But the moment didn't last. Another voice came from above. More distant. More urgent. More tracks outside. We got company coming up the trail. Caleb's eyes narrowed. More people. More pressure. They're not leaving, he whispered. Ghost shifted slightly, pressing closer. Caleb's mind raced. 3 inside. More outside. Limited exits. Limited time. And one critical truth. They weren't here by accident. They knew I'd come, Caleb said quietly. Ghost's gaze locked onto him. Steady. Certain. Caleb nodded once. Yeah, he said. They knew. The men inside regrouped. Search everything, one of them ordered. Boss wants whatever's down here. Caleb's posture changed. Subtle, but complete. The hesitation was gone. The uncertainty. The grief. All of it. Replaced by something sharper. Colder. More focused. The soldier returns, he murmured under his breath. Ghost's ears lifted. Caleb looked down at him. You ready? Ghost didn't hesitate. His body shifted forward. Prepared. Caleb's gaze moved back to the intruders. 3 targets. Close range. Unaware. For now, he took a slow breath, then another. Timing. Position. Control. He didn't need to win. He just needed to hold them. Long enough. Because now, this wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting what had been left behind. What had been trusted to him. And he wasn't going to lose it. Not here. Not now. Caleb's breathing slowed until it barely moved his chest. The 3 men spread out through the chamber, their boots echoing softly against the floor, their voices low but controlled. They weren't panicking. They weren't guessing. They were hunting. Ghost remained at Caleb's side, silent as shadow, his body low, muscles coiled tight with anticipation. Caleb leaned in just enough to whisper, On my mark. Ghost's ears flicked once. Understood. A flashlight beam passed across the crates again, slower this time. One of the men stepped closer to Caleb's position, his focus narrowing. Too close. Caleb shifted his weight slightly, preparing. 3 steps. That's all it would take. The man paused. Something felt off. Caleb saw it in the way his shoulders tightened. His instincts were working, but too late. Caleb moved. Fast. Silent. Precise. He closed the distance in one motion, grabbing the man's wrist and redirecting the flashlight beam away from himself. The man reacted instantly, but Caleb was already inside his guard. A quick movement. A controlled strike to the shoulder. The man lost balance and dropped to one knee, the flashlight clattering across the floor. Ghost moved at the same moment. He surged forward, intercepting the second man, before he could fully react. A sharp bark exploded through the chamber, followed by a powerful lunge that knocked the man backward, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. The third man turned, reaching for his weapon. Caleb stepped in. Fast. Controlled. He grabbed the man's arm, twisted it just enough to break his stance, then shoved him hard into the wall. Don't, Caleb said, his voice low, sharp, and absolute. The room fell into sudden stillness. Heavy breathing. Shifting boots. Ghost stood over the second man, teeth bared but not striking, holding him in place with nothing but presence and control. Caleb didn't escalate, didn't strike again, didn't push further. He didn't need to. The message was already clear. The three men froze, weapons still holstered. Uncertain. Because this wasn't the broken man they expected. Caleb released his grip slightly, stepping back just enough to create space, but not enough to give control. Who sent you? He asked. The first man, the one who had dropped to his knee, looked up slowly. His expression was tense, but not afraid. You already know, he said. Caleb's jaw tightened. Say it. The man hesitated. Then, Victor Hale. The name echoed through the chamber like a confirmation of everything Caleb had already figured out. Ghost's growl deepened slightly. Caleb nodded once. Of course he did. The second man shifted under Ghost's weight, testing the space. Ghost responded instantly. A sharp bark. A step forward. The man froze again. Caleb didn't look away from the first man. How long were you tracking me? He asked. Since you left the ranch, the man replied. Caleb's expression hardened. So this wasn't about throwing me out, he said. It was about following me. The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. Caleb exhaled slowly. Figures. From above. More noise. Doors slamming. Voices shouting. Movement inside. They're down there. Caleb's eyes shifted toward the tunnel. More coming, he said. Ghost glanced upward, alert. The three men on the ground exchanged quick looks. The situation had changed. For everyone. Caleb stepped back fully now, putting distance between himself and them. Get up, he said. The men hesitated, then slowly complied. Ghost stayed close, watching every movement. No sudden actions. No risks. Caleb's mind worked quickly. 3 here. More above. He couldn't hold this position forever. Didn't need to. He needed time, and a way to shift the situation. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. He glanced at the equipment around the room, then remembered. The communications unit, the old system in the first chamber. It had power. It might still connect. Caleb looked at Ghost. We move, he said quietly. Ghost stepped back from the second man, but didn't take his eyes off him. The message was clear. Don't try anything. Caleb turned toward the corridor. Stay here, he said to the men. You follow, we don't have this conversation again. They didn't argue. They didn't move. They understood. Caleb and Ghost slipped back into the corridor, moving quickly but quietly. Behind them, the tension remained thick, unresolved. Waiting. The moment they cleared the corner, Caleb's pace increased. We don't have long, he said. Ghost matched him step for step. They reached the first chamber. Caleb moved straight to the communications table, brushing dust aside as he powered on the unit. The system hummed. Lights flickered, then held. Come on, Caleb muttered. The screen blinked once, twice, then came to life. Static, but active. Ghost stood watch at the tunnel entrance, listening for movement. Caleb grabbed the receiver, adjusted the frequency. Tried once. Nothing. Tried again. A faint crackle answered. He leaned in. This is Caleb Walker, he said. If anyone's on this channel, I need immediate assistance. Static. Then, a voice. Faint. Distorted. Walker? Caleb froze. He knew that voice. Logan? He said. The line crackled again. Caleb? That you? Relief hit fast, but Caleb pushed it down. Yeah, he said. I need you up near Hale Ridge. There's a cabin coordinates coming through now. He tapped quickly, sending what data he could. Multiple intruders, he added, armed. Situation contained for now, but not for long. The line went quiet for a second. Then, I'm on my way, Logan said. Stay put. Caleb exhaled slowly. Copy that. The line went dead. Caleb set the receiver down, looked at Ghost. We bought ourselves time. Ghost's tail gave one slow movement, but his ears remained sharp, focused, because the fight wasn't over yet. From the tunnel, footsteps echoed again, more this time, closer. Caleb's posture shifted once more, back into position, back into control. All right, he said quietly. Round 2. Ghost stepped forward beside him. Ready. And this time, they wouldn't just hold the line, they would finish it. Caleb stepped into position at the mouth of the corridor, his body angled just enough to keep sightlines on both the tunnel and the chamber behind him. The light from the bunker cast long shadows across the walls, turning every movement into something larger, something harder to read. Ghost stood slightly ahead of him, still, focused. The low hum of the bunker blended with the growing sound of boots approaching. More than before, more controlled. Caleb inhaled slowly. Not aggressive, he whispered to Ghost. We control it. We don't escalate. Ghost's ears flicked. Understood. The first man appeared at the end of the tunnel, flashlight raised, weapon still holstered but ready. Behind him, 2 more, then another. 4 total. These weren't the same 3 from before. Different posture, different spacing, more disciplined. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Private contractors, he murmured. The lead man stopped when his light hit Caleb. The beam steadied, then lowered slightly. You're Caleb Walker, the man said. Not a question, a statement. Caleb didn't move. Depends. Who's asking? The man gave a small nod, as if confirming something. We're not here for you, he said calmly. We're here for what's down here. Ghost's growl rose, low and controlled. Caleb stepped forward half a pace. You already crossed the line, he said. Turn around. Walk out. You can still do that. The man's expression didn't change. Can't do that, he replied. We've got a contract. Caleb's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said quietly. I figured. The tension thickened. The space between them felt smaller, tighter, ready to snap. Then, from above, sirens. Faint at first, then clearer, cutting through the storm. All heads turned slightly. Even Ghost's ears shifted. The lead man frowned. Sheriff, Caleb said. The word landed hard. The man exhaled slowly. Timing's not great, he muttered. Behind him, one of the others shifted. What's the call? The lead man didn't answer right away. He looked at Caleb, then at Ghost, then back toward the tunnel behind him. Calculating. Weighing. Caleb held his ground. Didn't move. Didn't push. Just waited. Because now, he didn't need to fight. The sirens grew louder, closer. Then, voices, commands, clear, authoritative. Sheriff's Department, anyone inside, make yourselves known. The sound echoed down into the bunker. The lead man's shoulders dropped slightly. Looks like this is where we step out, he said. Caleb didn't respond. Didn't need to. The man nodded once, then turned. Let's go. The others followed without argument. They moved back through the tunnel, one by one, disappearing into the light above. Ghost stayed still until the last one was gone. Then his posture eased just slightly. Caleb exhaled. Long. Controlled. Stay sharp, he whispered. Ghost remained alert, because this wasn't over. Not yet. Moments later. Footsteps again. Different this time. Heavier. Faster. Then, a familiar voice. Caleb. Logan. Caleb moved toward the ladder. Climbed quickly. Ghost right behind him. They emerged into the cabin. The storm had softened slightly, but snow still pressed against the windows, still whispered against the walls. Logan stood near the center of the room, flanked by 2 deputies. His eyes locked onto Caleb immediately. You look like hell, Logan said. Caleb let out a short breath. Feels about right. Logan stepped closer, his gaze scanning Caleb quickly, checking for injuries, damage, anything out of place. Then his attention shifted to Ghost. The dog stood tall, alert, a thin line of blood visible along his side where a glancing strike had caught him during the earlier struggle. Logan crouched slightly. You took a hit, huh? he said quietly. Ghost didn't flinch, didn't back away. Caleb knelt beside him, his hand moving gently along the dog's side. It's Minor, he said. He's still standing. Ghost's tail moved once. Slow. Steady. Logan nodded. Good dog. He stood again, his expression shifting. More serious now. What happened here? He asked. Caleb glanced toward the hatch, then back at Logan. Long story, he said. But it ends with Victor Hale trying to take something that doesn't belong to him. Logan's eyes narrowed. I had a feeling this wasn't just a family dispute. Caleb reached into his jacket, pulling out Emily's letter and the photograph. And this proves it. Logan took them carefully, scanning the contents. His expression changed as he read, understanding settling in. So this place, Logan said slowly. It's yours. Caleb nodded once. Legally, Logan added. Caleb held his gaze. Yeah, Logan exhaled. Then Victor's got a problem. Outside, deputies were moving through the property, securing the area, escorting the remaining men away. The storm was breaking, slowly. Light began to creep through the clouds. Caleb stepped toward the doorway, looked out across the snow-covered mountains. For the first time since the night began, he felt it. Not relief, not yet, but something close. Ground, stability. Ghost stepped beside him, leaning slightly against his leg. Caleb reached down, resting his hand on the dog's head. We're still here, he said quietly. Ghost didn't move, didn't need to, because for the first time, Caleb wasn't being pushed out. He wasn't running. He wasn't surviving. He was standing. And everything that had been hidden, everything that had been buried, was finally in the open. The storm didn't end all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, like the mountains themselves were deciding whether to let go. By morning, the wind had softened to a whisper, and the heavy snow settled into stillness, covering everything in a quiet, untouched white. Caleb stood just outside the cabin, the same place where, hours ago, he had pushed open a frozen door and stepped into something he didn't understand. Now, he understood, at least enough. Ghost stood beside him, his body relaxed for the first time since they had arrived. The small wound along his side had been cleaned and wrapped by Logan's team, and though it slowed him slightly, it didn't take anything from his presence. He was still strong, still steady, still exactly where Caleb needed him to be. Caleb looked out across the valley below. The ranch was somewhere beyond the ridge, hidden behind distance and snowfall. It felt farther away now, not just in miles, but in meaning. Victor Hale's world, that chapter, was closed. Logan stepped out behind him, pulling his coat tighter against the cold. You're going to have a lot of paperwork ahead of you, he said, half smiling. Caleb let out a quiet breath. Figures. Logan stepped beside him, looking out at the same view. Victor's done, he added. What he tried to pull. It's not just a civil issue anymore. Breaking and entering. Conspiracy. Hiring contractors to recover property that isn't his. He's got bigger problems than you, now. Caleb nodded slowly. There was no satisfaction in it. No sense of victory. Just closure. What about the place? Caleb asked. Logan glanced back toward the cabin. It's yours, he said simply. Everything tied to it. Your name's on the records we found in the bunker. Your father made sure of that. Caleb looked down at the snow beneath his boots. My father knew, he said quietly. Logan didn't respond right away. Sounds like he did more than know, he said after a moment. Caleb nodded. He could still hear the recording, still feel the weight of those words. You're not broken, he exhaled slowly. I wish he'd told me, Caleb said. Logan gave a small shrug. Some men don't know how to say things until it's too late. Caleb didn't argue, because he understood that now, more than he wanted to. Ghost nudged his hand gently. Caleb looked down. The dog's eyes were calm, steady, present. Caleb reached down, resting his hand against his head. Guess it's just us figuring it out now, he said. Ghost's tail moved once. Agreement. The sun began to break through the clouds, casting a pale gold light across the snow-covered trees. The mountains shifted in color, from cold gray to something warmer, something alive again. Caleb turned back toward the cabin. For a moment, he just stood there, taking it in. Then he moved. Days passed, then weeks. The snow began to melt slowly, revealing the ground beneath, the path leading back through the trees, the outline of something that wasn't just a hidden place anymore. It was a beginning. Caleb worked, not because he had to, Because he needed to. He cleaned the cabin, cleared the entrance, reinforced the structure where time had worn it thin. The bunker below, he left mostly untouched, respecting what it was, understanding what it meant. Ghost stayed with him through it all. Every step, every task, every quiet moment. The nights were still hard sometimes. The memories didn't disappear. They didn't fade, but they didn't control him the same way anymore. Because now, he had somewhere to stand, somewhere that made sense, somewhere that didn't push him away. One morning, as the snow fully gave way to early spring, Caleb stood at the edge of the clearing. A truck approached slowly along the narrow path, then another. Not strangers. Not intruders. Veterans. Men with the same look in their eyes Caleb had once seen in the mirror. And beside them, dogs. Different breeds. Different sizes. Same purpose. Same loyalty. Caleb watched as they stepped out, unsure at first, scanning the space, taking in the quiet, the isolation. Ghost stepped forward beside him, not tense, not guarded, calm, welcoming. Caleb walked toward them, stopped a few feet away. "This place," he said, his voice steady. "It's for people like us." The men looked at him. Some nodded. Some didn't speak at all. But they stayed. That was enough. Days turned into more. The cabin became something new. Not a secret. Not a bunker. A refuge. A place where the noise could settle. Where the weight could be shared. Where no one had to explain what couldn't be explained. Ghost moved among them naturally. Checking. Watching. Sitting beside those who needed it most. Doing what he had always done for Caleb. Now for others. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Caleb stood at the doorway again. The same place. But everything had changed. Ghost sat beside him, his body relaxed, his breathing slow. Caleb looked out across the land. The quiet, the light, the people behind him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel lost. He didn't feel pushed out. He didn't feel like he was running from something. He felt present, whole enough to keep going. He reached down, resting his hand on Ghost's head. "You didn't just get me here," he said quietly. "You kept me here." Ghost leaned into him, steady, loyal, unshaken. Caleb nodded once, then looked forward, because this wasn't the end. It was the start of something better, a place built from loss, protected by loyalty, and carried forward by a man, and the dog who refused to let him fall. If you believe a man deserves a place to stand and protect what's his, type yes in the comments. Sometimes justice doesn't come easy, but when it does, it's worth every step. Stick around and subscribe if you want more stories about grit, land, and standing your ground the right way.